Cortland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report, and hope everyone had a great holiday. Happy New Year to everyone. We've been on a hiatus, trying to really kind of, what would be the word, upgrade this show, and unfortunately we haven't been able to be successful in our efforts, but I am here to give you, of course, the Pegasus picks and previews, and what a great 2020 that it looks to be, despite the fact there have been some issues, including with this race. $3 million reduced from when it initially started about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when it was a $16 million race. It went from 16 to 12, and then the 16 was distributed from a $9 million race in 2018 or 2019, with a $7 million of the rest of the remaining purse going toward the Pegasus turf race. We've got a 3-1 setup in 2020, $3 million for the Pegasus on the dirt, and of course $1 million for the turf race, which is of course highlighted by the horses that won't compete in this year's edition of the Pegasus World Cup Invitational, that being Omaha Beach and Spun to Run. Spun to Run, of course, beat Omaha Beach in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile in what was Omaha Beach's second start since his return to racing after missing the Kentucky Derby with the Trap Epilogatus, which kept him out of the Triple Crown races. And in addition to his return races, which were put back on about 3 occasions, he won the Santa Anita Sprint Championship over Chancelot, who ran an amazing race against, who of course is the sprint champion, Matoli, in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Spun to Run, of course, had come out of the route races, had won a minor stakes at Parks prior to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and Omaha Beach got off to a sort of uncharacteristically slow start. It was kind of a problematic day all the way around for Mike Smith, who fared no better with Midnight Bisou, in addition to his other troubles that day. And Spun to Run basically controlled the race on the front end. Omaha Beach belatedly made a charge to finish second. He then went on and was brilliant in the Malibu, has 3 grade 1s to his name, the Arkansas Derby, the Malibu, and the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. Unfortunately, he will not race on this Saturday, Pegasus World Cup Invitational Day. Of course, this was supposed to be his last in what was already an abbreviated career, and Omaha Beach will always be known as a horse that, for what he couldn't, the races that he couldn't make, or the inactivity, as much or more so than what he accomplished on the racetrack. He will go to stud at Spendthrift Farm for Rick Porter's great friend, B. Wayne Hughes. It's unfortunate, but great for the stallion industry. He is by Warfront, who is an incredible dirt sprinter, miler, who went on and has had tremendous success siring good turf horses in addition to the dirt. And Omaha Beach represents that by being proficient on both surfaces. He will be a very, very much coveted stallion when we get into his yearlings and 2-year-olds in the next couple years. So unfortunately, we will not see him run. Spun to Run with a skin rash. He's also out. Apparently, there may have been some other issues going on with him, and so unfortunately, that rematch is off the table. In addition to the fact Maximum Security is not going to be running in this race, he was never targeted for it, despite his 4-for-4 record at Gulfstream Park, so that in and of itself is also unfortunate. But at least Spun to Run and Omaha Beach were creating what would be the headliner storyline for this Pegasus World Cup Invitational. This is not going to take place, but there are others in this race, and as my dad always told me, that no matter what happens, when somebody leaves, there's always someone else to take your place. There's still 10 entries in here, and let's take a look at those horses. True Timber, a horse who's been great at stakes place at both the grade 1, 2, and 3 level. Joe Bravo, Jersey Joe Bravo on board. He's coming out of post number 1. All these posts will be moved inward, so some of these numbers might be affected on World Cup Day by the defections of Omaha Beach in the number 5 and Spun to Run in the number 9. But either way, take it as though those horses exist. True Timber coming out of the 1. He's 20-1 with Jersey Joe Bravo. Tax, who of course was on the Triple Crown Trail, ran in the Derby and the Belmont, and then he ran in the Travers, won the Jim Dandy after being 2nd in the Wood, 14th in the Kentucky Derby, 4th in the Belmont Stakes, has had a couple runs since that Travers Stakes, ran reasonably well in the Discovery Handicap. He's trained by Danny Gargan, Jose Ortiz, one of the Ortiz brothers. He'll be in the irons. He's 12-1 coming out of number 2. Diamond Oops Julian Le Peru is riding 20-1 out of number 3. Seeking the Soul. We all know that, of course, he's been a Grade 1 winner, Grade 1 place, had an unsuccessful West Coast campaign in preparing for the Breeders' Cup out at Santa Anita, did not run particularly well in either the Pacific Classic, was kind of a non-factor in the Awesome again, didn't run, particularly well in the Breeders' Cup Classic either. Comes back to the East Coast where he has shown that form at Churchill Downs chiefly, most notably, and he also ran okay in the Pegasus, so he has experience in back class at Gulfstream. He's 30-1 though, so he could be of value too, and we're certainly going to talk about that in a few minutes. Omaha Beach, number 5 is Scratch. Number 6, Higher Power, a horse that I'm very, very, no pun intended, high on. Going into the Awesome again after winning the Pacific Classic and what I thought was one of the strongest 1.25 mile efforts by any horse in 2019, was a little compromised by what I think is going to be an issue here, and that is the 9 furlongs. Although John Sadler will probably tell you that tactically this horse can place himself in a more favorable position to be able to kick at 1 1/8 miles, and certainly even using a little energy early on should, if he's really this sort of high-class horse we think he is, should translate into an effort where the early energy is not going to deplete his kick in the stretch. The 1 1/8 mile distance is not a problem. Therefore, those tactics can be employed successfully. Higher Power, Flavian Pratt aboard. He's 6-1, may end up being the post-time favorite. That's very, very possible. He's a really nice horse. He was a distant 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Classic, though, after running 3rd in the Awesome again. So it'll be interesting to see if this time in his 5-year-old debut, he will run a little bit better in this spot. Again, Gulfstream also has a short and stretch run, so that could work to his disadvantage if he's not more forwardly placed here. Number 7 is War Story, a former Pegasus participant. He's been graded, placed in a number of races. He's been a trooper over the years. Joel Rosario has the mount. Will that help him? He's 30-1. Hopefully Rosario can assist him and make that 30-1 for anyone who bets on him. Seem to be a very, very logical choice. Number 8 is Mr. Freeze. He was the winner of the 2018 West Virginia Derby, trained by Dale Romans. Luis Saez has the mount. Obviously, Maximum Security is not running here. Might as well pick up a decent mount, but he's 30-1. Has not been as good as he was in the West Virginia Derby, and it all started to kind of go downhill for him at the Pennsylvania Derby of 2018, won by McKenzie, who's not in this race. But Bob Baffert does have a entrant in here. We'll talk about him in a second. As a matter of fact, less than that, Mucho Gusto. Scratch the number 9, spun to run first, Mucho Gusto. The winner, of course, of the Affirmed and the Las Barrera. Second to Maximum Security in the Haskell. Ran out of his skin in that race. Ran a credible 3rd in the Travers, and he tailed off and didn't run so well when running 4th behind Owendale in the Oklahoma Derby. Bob Baffert freshened him up, skipped the Breeders' Cup, didn't run him any of the subsequent stakes during the holiday period after the World Thoroughbred Championships. He's on a long layoff here. Coming in, he's 9-2 though. He is the morning line favorite. Irad Ortiz in the irons, which I like. I like the fact Irad's ability to have that sort of chemistry with the horse could work very well for Mucho Gusto. Knows Gulfstream well, but the layoff, is that going to adversely affect this horse? It was thought that Roadster might run here. He's had a couple runs on Breeders' Cup Day in the Damascus, ran in the Native Diver, was beaten by Omaha Beach in the Malibu, so he had 3 runs. You would think he was going to be the logical choice, but out of the 10, Mucho Gusto, he'll be moved into the number 9 with the scratch of Spun to Run in Omaha Beach, and he'll be 9-2 with Irad Ortiz for trainer Bob Baffert. The number 11 is Tenfold. He, of course, was 3rd in the Preakness behind Triple Crown winner Justify. He was part of that 2018 Triple Crown. Didn't run so well in the Belmont. Was downgraded in class by Steve Asmussen in some conditions races. Didn't really fare any better. He's been okay. He's a son of Curlin. And he just hasn't really amounted to be the horse that I think Asmussen and others thought he would be. He's 30-1. Tyler Gaffalione is the jockey. Will he come to life here coming out of post 11 or post 10? And that's Tenfold for trainer Steve Asmussen. And then, of course, Bodie Express won a conditions race at Gulfstream West after a long layoff after unseating Johnny Velasquez in the Preakness Stakes of 2019. 2nd in the Florida Derby to Maximum Security. He has back class here. He's 30-1, though. A lot of people, at least the odds makers at this point, have not really put a lot of stock into his localized good efforts. And so whether they're setting everyone up to say this is really not a 30-to-1 horse. Take your shot with him. He is going to run well. Or whether you think his odds will go down. Either way, if they even split in half, you're looking at 15-to-1. And Bodie Express is a horse that has some value here if, in fact, the mile and an eighth in 2020 doesn't, is not as much or isn't a problem any more than it was when he ran well in the Florida Derby. So that's your 10-horse field for the Pegasus of 2020. And let's get into the picks for this edition of the World Cup Invitational from Gulfstream Park. The horses that I like in here, I like Mucho Gusto. I like Mucho Gusto, always have. Wasn't pleased with his Oklahoma Derby. Don't like the layoff. Not saying this with an amazing amount of confidence. I look at him, the number 10, the number 2, Tax, the number 6, Higher Power, and the number 4, that would be Seeking the Soul. 10, 2, 6, 4. That's one of your picks that you could look at. And I'll let you know whether that's my final pick or not. Another scenario you could play, and I'm going to work from the bottom to the top like I was supposed to. The number 10, Mucho Gusto winning it. The number 6, that would be Higher Power finishing second. The number 12, Bodie Express finishing third. And then you could use a couple of horses to fill out the trifecta. And that would be number 2, Tax, or the number 4, Seeking the Soul. You could even go as far to fill that superfecta box is what I meant to say. You could easily go as far to fill the superfecta with the number 8, Mr. Freeze. 10, 6, 12, and then to fill out that superfecta, either the 2, the 4, or the 8. 10, 6, 12, and either the 2, the 4, or the 8. And that would be Tax, Seeking the Soul, or Mr. Freeze to fill out that superfecta. So those are my picks. My final pick is, though, I do like Mucho Gusto in here. Again, I'm a little biased to Baffert, but at the same time, I say that without, overwhelming confidence. I think he can win it. I think it's going to be tough, though. There's some horses in here that have had some decent runs in the last 2 to 3 months. You could easily put value in Seeking the Soul. Those are the horses I think you should use. Mucho Gusto, Seeking the Soul, maybe Bodie Express, Higher Power, horses like that, maybe Tax. That's kind of what you're looking at, but I would have no problem with any of you viewers out there looking at other horses. But I am going to sort of stick with my original, the 10, the 2, Tax, the number 6, that would be Higher Power, and the number 4, which would be, of course, Seeking the Soul. That's a possibility. These other choices that I've made also could work well for you. We're certainly going to recap it and talk about that in earnest, along with some of the other races coming up in this early season cavalcade of top handicap horses in conjunction with the road to the Kentucky Derby right here at the CS Racing Report.